Hello algebra students, this is Mrs. Palmer, and in this presentation we're going to talk about writing and finding equations of lines in slope-intercept form, specifically slope-intercept form. So given certain pieces of information, can we come up with the equation of the line? We're going to start just by reminding ourselves what slope-intercept form is. This would be slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. Now remember, we're talking about the x and y representing ordered pairs that would appear on our graph on the coordinate plane. But m represents our slope, which we've already discussed visually is our rise over our run on the coordinate plane, and b is our y-intercept, which means, again, visually from the graph, where our line would cross the y-axis. So somewhere there, such as right there, where we might cross the y-axis. Okay, so we're going to see several scenarios in this recording, being given different pieces of information and using that information to come up with an equation. I'm going to start here. Find the equation of the line with a slope of -4 and a y-intercept of 6. Now, if you know slope-intercept form, which I hope you do, then you know that this question is going to be your favorite kind of question, because when you're given the slope and you're given the y-intercept, it really is as simple as knowing where these things belong in the equation. So in this case, knowing that the slope would be represented by m, or the coefficient with the x, and that the y-intercept is the constant number that's added or subtracted on the end here, this would be our answer. This is the equation of the line with a slope of -4 and a y-intercept of 6. Now, in this recording, we're talking mainly about just coming up with equations. I would like to just remind you about what this would mean about a graph. Just verbally, this would mean that we would have a graph that would cross the y-axis at 6, and it would slant down because the slope is -4, which we would represent as -4 divided by 1 if we were using rise over run. Okay, so again, probably our favorite kind of question in this recording. Very simple. All right, now, excuse me, we'd like to find the equation of the line with a slope of 1/2. So once again, being given a very key piece of information, the slope is 1/2. But now we're passing through the point for -6. So we're not given the y-intercept. We're going to have to figure that out for ourselves. But if we know a point that exists on the graph, we have an example of an xy point that works with our line. So what we can do is use slope-intercept form. I'm going to be writing that a lot, so we remember. And I can use -6 as a y. I know that my slope is 1/2. That was given to me. 4 as an x, and then in this model I'm left with b as the only unknown, which means I can very easily solve for it. So -6 equals 2, sorry about that line, plus b, subtract 2 from both sides, and we're going to get that b is equal to -8. So now I have m, I have b, which means I have an equation. All right. So to review this, given the slope, that's great, but use the point that you've been given to solve for b. As always, guys, you can pause this recording whenever you need to. Okay. So find the equation of the line passing through 2 points. So in this case, we're not given slope at all. So we're going to need to go find it, and we know that there is a formula to find that. But I'll review it for you here. y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Now, I get this question all the time. I've answered it quite a bit. Does it matter which which point is representing the x1, y1, or you know, etc., x2, y2? No, it doesn't matter. Just pick. And as long as you're consistent, it's going to work out fine. So subbing in there, I'm going to have -2 minus 5 divided by 0 minus 4. So I'm going to get negative 7 divided by negative 4, which I would definitely want to call 7/4 because the double negatives would make that positive, and that's just going to be easier to deal with. So my slope is 7/4. That's great. So now I have m. Just going to highlight that I know that information. And now I would like you to let's look back at those points. Let's just look at those points for a second. Do we notice something about this point? Well, if I were to graph that point on a little grid over here, that point would be 0, -2. Okay, so it would be right there. And I'm obviously exaggerating the size of the point, but that is actually my y-intercept. Any point of the form 0 and then the y value is going to live on the y-axis, and it's going to be our y-intercept. So what's great about this problem is that I'm done. I found my slope already. Oops, sorry about that, guys. Let me rewrite that. Okay, so I'm finished. But let's say that I didn't notice that. Let's say that it just didn't occur to me that that was my y-intercept. I could certainly pick that point as my x and my y, go back to slope-intercept form, sub in -2 for y, 7/4 for m, 0 for x, and solve for b, and look at what happens. Because that's 0, that goes all away, and b is -2. So you can see that even if you didn't notice that was a y-intercept, we could still get there. And by the way, I also could have used this point. Yes, we really, really would come out with the same answer. Let me prove that to you quickly, that it would not matter which point you use. That would be 5 equals 7/4 times 4 plus b. Look at what happens, guys. You see how you subtract that 7, and there it is again. So, whoops, that should be an equals. So you can see that you have some options here, but they all should lead us to the correct conclusion. There it is right there, 7/4x minus 2. All right, so now find the equation of the line passing through 2 points. We just did this, but now you can see that we haven't been given a y-intercept, but that was okay. We knew how to do that anyway. So slope formula. Yes, I'm writing them all out. I want us to remember them. So, okay. So using, this is my first point, this is my second. I'll get 6 minus 8 divided by -4 minus 6, -2 over -10, which will reduce to 1/5. Great, 1/5. So I have my slope, and now we're just going to randomly pick a point. I find most people like to pick points that are positive, but again, it really doesn't matter. So we'll pick 6, 8 as our point. So 8 equals 1/5 of 6 plus b. 8 equals, goodness, 6/5 plus b. Now at this point, you may like to convert to a decimal if you really, really, really want to. Please know that you don't need to. We can just turn 8 into something divided by 5 and divide and subtract 6/5. So we're going to get that b is 34/5. And yeah, that won't reduce, so we're just going to leave it as that. If we were going to plot that on a graph, we probably would want to call that 6.8. So we could do that as well. I am going to leave it in its fractional form. So when I put this together, my final answer is y equals 1/5 x plus 34/5. And we've discussed this in class, but just to reiterate, one of the reasons we leave slope in fractional form is because we do refer to it as rise over run, and it's very easy in fractional form. For example, right here to say I would rise 1 and run 5. So that's why we would keep it that way. All right, so now, a little different. Find the equation of the line with the y-intercept of 7. Well, hey, that's great. I have a y-intercept. And an x-intercept of 1. So the easiest thing to think of here is, what do intercept points look like? Well, y-intercepts are 0, comma, the number. So there's a y-intercept. And then x-intercepts are the number, comma, 0. And that's because they're going to stay, just to remind you, on the axis. So here would be 1, 0, and then 0, 7 would be way up here. So that's how we know what the points would be. So to find slope, we use m. We'll do 0, 0, minus 7, divided by 1 minus 0. So we're going to get negative 7 over 1. We can just call that negative 7. You could leave it over 1 if you like. So we've got a slope of negative 7. And if you did want to do the graph, you can see that you would count down 7 over 1. So that would also reiterate that slope. So now, but this is great because we were told that we had a y-intercept of 7. There's b. So now we have m and we have b. And we have it all. There's our answer. Okay, so now this is a bit different. We're going to find the equation of a line parallel to another line and passing through a given point. Well, we might want to remind ourselves that parallel lines have the same slope. That's going to be really important here. Same. Okay, so now I'm going to take that line and I need to find the slope of that line, because if parallel lines have the same slope, then I need to know what it is. So moving the 4x over to the other side, it's going to become negative. And then dividing everything through by a negative 1 gives me y equals 4x minus 7. Well, in this particular case, I don't really care about the y-intercept. I care much more about the slope because I'm looking for what's parallel. So that means that the slope I want is 4. So I have that. And I also know that it passes through this point, 8, negative 5. So if it passes through the point 8, negative 5, well, there's an x and a y. So I'm going to be able to use that to find my y-intercept. So y equals mx plus b. Negative 5 equals 4 times 8 plus b. Subtract. And b equals negative 37. So I get asked a lot by students who say, why don't we just graph it? Why don't we just graph it? You absolutely can graph. You can answer these questions through graphing. That's great. Sometimes, though, the graphing is a little difficult, just for the size of the grid you might need, and that sort of thing. So we had our slope, 4. We now have our y-intercept. And we have our equation. All right? Okay, so let's back it up a little bit. Just to go back through and remind ourselves of all the different ways that we found equations of lines. My goodness, I'm getting interrupted all over the place. Okay, so we started with just being given slope and y-intercept, and that's great because then we just sub them into their appropriate place. And then what do we do if we have the slope and a point? And we learned we could solve for b with that. 2 points means that we need to find the slope using the slope formula first and then pick a point. Same thing here, find the slope first and then pick a point. And here, convert to ordered pairs. Take the intercepts and convert to ordered pairs, then go through that process again. And finally, if we're parallel to a line, that means that we are going to have the same slope as that line, so we get the slope from the line and then use the point. So hope this helped. Study hard. Happy learning.